You wake up in 2026. Your wrist chirps. A sleek piece of glass and silicon tells you your cortisol is high, your REM sleep was lacking, and your blood oxygen is dipping. You trust the data. You have been trained to believe that the smaller the device, the deeper the truth it holds. You have traded the clinical reality of a doctor's office for the frictionless convenience of an app. But there is a ghost in that machine. A decade ago, a 19-year-old college dropout proved that with a black turtleneck and a manufactured baritone, you can convince the most powerful men on Earth to play Russian roulette with the American medical system. This is not just the story of a $9 billion lie. It is a masterclass in how Silicon Valley weaponized your biology. You think you are too smart to be conned. Look at your 401k. Look at the disruptors still prowling Sand Hill Road. The tax you are paying today is not just in dollars. It is in the erosion of objective truth. We live in the fallout of a decade-long psychological operation that turned a medical laboratory into a cathedral of ego. Now, let us open the case file on Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. We are going to reveal the shadow behind the success. The story does not begin in a lab. It begins in a wardrobe. In 2003, a Stanford dropout named Elizabeth Holmes decided she did not want to build a company. She wanted to build a religion. She saw the vacuum left by the titans of the PC era and realized that Silicon Valley was not hungry for better medicine. It was hungry for a new messiah. She chose her vestments carefully. The Issey Miyake black turtleneck was a direct theft from the iconography of Steve Jobs. It was not fashion. It was a signal. It told investors, I am the sequel. But the costume was only the visual layer. The true weapon was the voice. It was a manufactured, low-frequency hum. A baritone that she maintained with the discipline of an opera singer. Why? Because in the lizard brain of a venture capitalist, a deep voice signals authority, stability, and adult supervision. She was not just pitching a blood testing device. She was hacking the biology of the men across the table. And look at who was at that table. This was not a board of directors. It was a council of elders from the Cold War. George Shultz, former Secretary of State. Henry Kissinger. General James Mattis. These were not medical experts. They were men who moved borders and commanded armies. To them, Holmes was not a scientist. She was a visionary who promised to do for the human body what the internet did for data. She sold them the Edison, a sleek, white box that she claimed could perform over 200 medical tests, from cholesterol to cancer, using only a single drop of blood from a finger prick. To a layman, it sounds like magic. To a scientist, it sounded like a violation of the laws of physics. But in the mid-2010s, magic was the only currency that mattered in Palo Alto. The mechanism of her ascent was an exercise in ruthless efficiency. She cultivated an aura of extreme secrecy, invoking trade secrets to dodge peer review. She surrounded herself with unimpeachable titans of the establishment, using their reputations as a human shield against scrutiny. And she weaponized the asymmetric risk of venture capital, triggering intense FOMO. She made investors feel that if they asked for a look under the hood, they were too small-minded to witness the revolution. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Holmes was the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. She graced the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and Inc., flashing that same haunting, unblinking stare. She had successfully convinced the world that the blood in your veins was just another data set to be disrupted. But while the magazines were being printed, the Edison was already smoking. The machine did not work. It had never worked. And as the valuation climbed, the shadow lengthened. To understand the crime, you have to look past the turtleneck and into the gut of the machine. In the headquarters of Theranos, the Edison was treated like a holy relic. It was a white-cased, rectangular box, no larger than a desktop computer. Holmes claimed it was a miniaturized laboratory, a mini-lab that could automate the messy, manual labor of blood diagnostics. But if you had peeled back that sleek plastic shroud in 2014, you would not have found a revolution. You would have found a crime scene. The technical mechanism of the Theranos fraud was built on a fundamental defiance of biology. When a real lab takes a vial of your blood, they have enough volume to run multiple tests. Holmes promised the same results with a nanotainer, a tiny vial the size of a pill, holding barely a few drops. Picture a lab technician at 2 in the morning. A nanotainer arrives from a Walgreens pharmacy. Inside are 3 drops of blood. It is not enough to run even one standard diagnostic test. So, the technician does something no investor was ever told about. She opens a bottle of saline and starts diluting the sample. 1 drop becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. By the time the machine reads it, the signal is almost gone. The data becomes noise. The results that Theranos sent back to patients, people checking for prostate cancer, thyroid issues, or pregnancy, were little more than a high-stakes coin flip. Holmes knew that if the investors saw the Edison failing, that $9 billion valuation would vanish like smoke in a California wildfire. So, she engineered a multi-layered deception that functioned like a classic shell game. It started with a proprietary wall of silence. She invoked the trade secret defense. If a scientist asked how the Edison worked, they were met by David Boies, the most feared litigator in America, who Theranos paid up to $1 million a month in legal fees. The secret was not technology. The secret was the failure itself. Then came the pivot. Here is the part that sounds impossible. Some Theranos tests never touched the Edison machine at all. In 2013, Theranos signed a massive deal with Walgreens to put wellness centers in pharmacies. But the Edison could not pass a basic validation test. So, Holmes and her chief operating officer, Sunny Balwani, executed the ultimate bait and switch. They spent millions of dollars secretly buying massive, industrial-sized blood analyzers from their competitor, Siemens. Holmes did not just fail. She ran a high-stakes smuggling operation inside her own headquarters. The revolutionary box investors were betting billions on was sometimes just a prop on the counter. They hid these giant Siemens machines in the back of the Palo Alto lab, behind locked doors. Theranos engineers essentially became mechanics in a chop shop, cracking open the Siemens machines, physically hacking the robotic arms, and supergluing custom parts to hide the logos. They built a Potemkin village out of bio-hazardous waste. When your blood arrived from Walgreens, it was not put into an Edison. It was run through the hacked competitor machine. But here is the forensic twist. Because the blood was already diluted to fit the false promise of the nanotainer, even the Siemens machines could not read it correctly. They were lying to the machines, so the machines lied to the patients. Let us talk about the weight of the evidence. On the balance sheet, Theranos claimed it was generating $100 million in revenue by 2014. The reality was a masterclass in cooking the books. According to the 2018 SEC indictment, the company actually made less than $100,000 from its proprietary tech. The rest was a phantom, a ledger entry built on the $700 million in venture capital they were burning through to maintain the illusion. Their burn rate was astronomical. They were not just burning cash. They were burning people. In the lab, the atmosphere was a paranoid panopticon. Employees were forbidden from speaking to one another across departments. If you were in engineering, then you could not talk to biology. This was not for security. It was so that no single person could see the full shape of the lie. When the chief scientist, Ian Gibbons, a man with a PhD from Cambridge and decades of experience, realized the Edison was pure vaporware, he was pressured and sidelined. Tragically, he took his own life in 2013, the day before he was scheduled to testify in a patent lawsuit involving the company. To the world, Elizabeth Holmes was the face of the future. To the people inside the Normandy lab, the internal code name for their testing facility, she was the architect of a bio-hazardous house of cards. They were handling live blood samples in an uncertified lab, using hacked machines to hide their origin. By 2015, the Edison was not a medical device. It was a prop in a long-running theater piece. And the curtain was about to be shredded. John Carreyrou, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, had started pulling on a single thread. It was a tip from a disgruntled former employee named Tyler Schultz, the grandson of the very man on the board, George Schultz. The whistleblower did not come from the outside. He came from within the family. He saw the Edison fail quality control tests 65% of the time. He saw the company report pass grades on tests that were wild statistical outliers. He saw the danger to the public. And when he spoke up against the sunk cost fallacy blinding the board, the $9 billion machine turned its fangs on him. The collapse of a $9 billion empire does not happen with a bang. It happens with a single, ink-stained needle. On October 15, 2015, the Wall Street Journal published John Carreyrou's investigation. The headline was a scalpel. A prized startup's struggles. Within hours, the carefully curated voice of Elizabeth Holmes began to crack. The black turtleneck, once a symbol of genius, suddenly looked like a funeral shroud. Let us look at the final audit, the ledger of what was actually lost. When the SEC finally moved in, they did not just find a failed business. They found a $700 million black hole of investor capital. That $9 billion valuation was a phantom, a number conjured from the collective greed of men who wanted to believe in a miracle more than they wanted to look at a data sheet. In the end, the stock was worth exactly zero. Elizabeth Holmes, once the wealthiest self-made woman, saw her net worth vanish overnight. But the financial theft is the least of the crimes. The real cost to the public was measured in tens of thousands of voided blood tests. In 2016, a federal inspection by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services found that Theranos laboratory practices posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. This is not regulatory jargon. It is a clinical way of saying they were playing Russian roulette with human lives. We are talking about patients who were told they were having a miscarriage based on a Theranos test, only to find out their pregnancy was healthy. We are talking about people told their PSA levels indicated prostate cancer when they were perfectly fine. The mechanism of the final collapse was a swift punch of reality. The CMS banned Holmes from the blood testing industry for 2 years, effectively decapitating the company. Walgreens terminated its contract and sued for $140 million, realizing they had turned their pharmacies into a front for a massive fraud. And finally, the criminal dock. In 2022, a jury in San Jose found Holmes guilty of 4 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. She was sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. As you sit here in 2026, surrounded by the next generation of AI-driven medical breakthroughs and disruptive health tech, you have to ask yourself, has the system actually changed? Or did we just trade one voice for another? We still live in a culture that rewards the hustle over the hypotheses, where a founder's vision is worth more than a peer-reviewed study. If the Theranos story sounds familiar, it should. Today, the same playbook is back. Replace proprietary blood tech with proprietary AI models. Replace the Edison box with a black box algorithm. And once again, investors are wiring billions into companies that refuse to show their work. The technology has changed. The psychology has not. Every time you see a founder who refuses to show their work, who hides behind proprietary algorithms, or who speaks in the hushed, authoritative tones of a secular saint, you are looking at the ghost of Elizabeth Holmes. She proved that the fake it till you make it ethos is a biohazard. In the world of tech, a bug in your code might crash your phone. In the world of blood, a bug in your code can kill you. Here is the uncomfortable question. Was Elizabeth Holmes an anomaly, or just the most honest product of Silicon Valley? Because if her engineers had miraculously figured out the physics before the Wall Street Journal published their exposé, she would not be sitting in a federal prison today. She would be on the board of the world's biggest AI companies, teaching masterclasses on leadership. In American finance, the only difference between a visionary and a felon is your runway. Do you trust science? Or are you just seduced by the voice telling you what you want to hear? Because in the ledger of history, every debt must eventually be paid.